So, hope everyone's had a good afternoon so far, and I would talk a little bit more about these variations on greed, hatred, and delusion, and how we change our habits. So some of you have seen this sutta before that I'm about to share with you. But I find it really useful to go back to this one from time to time, and in case we haven't seen it before, we can think about it in this particular way with regard to greed, hatred, and delusion. Sutta number 8 on effacement. We're going to skip over the beginning of the sutta where the Buddha is talking about how people sometimes who have deep meditation think that they're practicing effacement. Effacement is like a rubbing away or wearing away of the defilements. And they think that they're making really good progress on this, but he says actually it's not so. It's not how you practice effacement. And then he starts talking about how you practice effacement, how you really wear away the defilements. And Ajahn Gunha often has this theme also where he talks about, it's not just about sitting or formal meditation, whatever posture you use. It's also about changing the way we interact with others and purifying our sila and various other things. So this is what the Buddha is saying. And he says, this is how you work on it. And it starts with these statements. Others will be cruel, but we will not be cruel. Others will kill living beings, but we will not kill living beings. Others will steal, but we do not steal. Others will be unchaste, but will not be unchaste. Others will lie, but we will not lie. Others will speak divisively, but we will not speak divisively, or harshly, or talk nonsense, or be covetous. So here's a very close relative to greed. And of course, other things that we've just mentioned can also be because of greed or hatred. Others will have ill will, but will not have ill will. This is very connected to hatred or aversion. And then we have wrong view. Others will have wrong view, but will have right view, wrong thought. And it goes through each one of the Noble Eightfold Path: speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and samadhi, translated here as immersion. And then two factors or two kinds of experience that go beyond the Noble Eightfold Path: right knowledge and right freedom. So awakening, liberation. And then he talks about the other parts of the 5 hindrances. So he's already covered sensual desire and ill will, now dullness and drowsiness, restlessness, and doubt. Others will be irritable, but will be without anger. Others will be acrimonious, but we will be without acrimony. Offensiveness, contemptuousness, jealousy, stinginess. Others will be devious, but we won't be devious, or deceitful, or pompous. We won't be hard to admonish. So it's a theme that the Buddha talks about. We can really see our sort of clinging to our views and our sense of self when we're hard to admonish. We can take in feedback. Others will have bad friends, meaning people who are doing unwholesome things, but we will not. We will have friends who are good, upright friends. Diligent, will have faith, have a sense of conscience and prudence, so hiri and uttapa, will be well learned, We won't be lazy, we'll be energetic, we'll be mindful, accomplished in wisdom. And the final one, others will be attached to their own views, holding them tight and refusing to let go. But here we will not be attached to our own views, not holding them tight, but we'll let them go easily. And this is views, our own perceptions and views. This doesn't mean the Dhamma. What do they say in the footnote? Typically, this follows corrupt wishes and wrong view. Okay, so this kind of comes in a, where we have the wrong attitude and then we don't want to let it go. So the way to use this list is to really reflect on, if maybe we're running into some suffering, dukkha of some kind, reflect on whether or not any of these things could use some attention. And sometimes we are struggling with something, but we don't really understand, or we haven't been able to really put our finger on what it is. And then, kind of thinking, oh, that really is resentment, or that really is. And sometimes people translate the Pali a little bit differently, and you can see in different translations maybe something that strikes you as familiar in your experience. And even if you would characterize whatever we're up against a little bit differently, we can still use the same method that the Buddha talks about here. So there's first that acknowledgement of what we're experiencing, because greed, also includes all of the subtler versions of desire, any kind of wanting to pull something in our direction, hatred, that pushing away, all the subtler versions of it. We can see several things that fall into that category, and confusion or not understanding the way things are, whatever that might be. So when the Buddha says, once you give rise, I say that even giving rise to the thought of skillful qualities is very helpful, let alone following that path with your speech and actions. So you should give rise to these thoughts. Others will be cruel, but will not be cruel here. Or whatever those, there are 44 that I just went through. It's like really looking at ourselves. One of the things that's useful sometimes is we can have critical thoughts of other people. And we can see the things that they're doing that's causing them and maybe the people around them suffering, maybe even it's impinging on our own experience in life. But when we think about something someone else is doing that's unwholesome, then it's really important to immediately look at ourselves. Is there any way in which I do that? And can I see that in myself? It's not to be overly self-critical. It's just to try to understand where our views are incomplete or wrong, or where we have habits that we haven't become aware of. And then once we're aware of them, we take the position, the other side, okay, there's a tendency here to be obstinate, or there's a tendency here to be pompous, puffed up, and feel like we know better than other people, something like that maybe. And then you take you have this thought come up, well, regardless of whether other people do that, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to really pay attention to that. And this is where it's important to hear what other people have to say. Maybe it's something we don't feel like we're acting like that, but underneath, it really is coming off that way. Other people experience it that way. And then we have to ask ourselves, well, is there really something there underneath in my conditioning that needs to be looked at? And so we bring this thought up, whatever challenges. We bring up the positive, encouraging ourselves to not do it that way. And then the same list again, this is the step. So first we get it in mind, and we start to pinpoint it in our behavior. And then there's this step of going around that. So this is, it's not like we have to beat ourselves up for things. It's more like we just look at what is the way around this behavior. So let's say we're prone to anger. Well, the way around it is non-anger. In Venerable Nyanamoli's translation in the Wisdom Publishing volume, it'll go through the whole list and talk about what the sort of opposite way of relating is. If you feel like you want to kill something, then you avoid killing. Every time you stop yourself from doing it, you're developing this restraint. You're developing more, probably eventually anyway, more kindness, more sensitivity. And, I know people who are cruel to animals, cruel to living beings. They have no sense of that being wrong at all. They just feel like human beings have this right to just get rid of whatever animal is in the way. And that's just how they handle it. They don't realize what that does to the mind. And so, whatever this particular flavor of greed, hatred, or delusion we're suffering from, to really notice it, identify it, take the other road, take the way around it. And the metaphor, the simile here is there's a rough path and there's another smooth path that you take to get around the rough spot. Suppose there's a rough ford, a place where you would cross the stream, but it's rough, it's rocky, or it's got deep holes or something. You go to a place in the stream where you can just walk across a smooth ford to get around it. And that's the way it is with every one of these things, developing on the Noble Eightfold Path. Right speech. There's this habit in my speech that is not beautiful. And then you stop yourself before you say what that is. Say that kind of thing again, and you say something in a way that's not harsh or not untrue or whatever it is. And every time we do it, we're conscious of it, and we strengthen ourselves. The final one here, where if we're attached to our own views, we hold them tight, we refuse to let go, we get around it by letting go. And this is a very valuable practice. And one way to do it, we've got a couple of people in the community who are right now doing a course of Oren J. Sofer's Say What You Mean. I don't know if that's the name of the course, but that's one of his books, and he uses, I think, as a basis, nonviolent communication. It's when we start to learn that, when we're having a conflict with someone, instead of just trying to argue our position, if we listen to them, their side, and we repeat back what they're saying, it starts to help us let go of the tight grasp we have on our own side. We really try to understand them, and we repeat what what I understand you saying is like this. Then you start to let go a bit of your own side of this argument. And you start to try to see what's really true in what they're saying and what's true in what we're saying. And also sometimes when we are in that system, when we express what we want or what we need, it comes through from what we feel. If we talk about how we feel, a lot of times it helps us to let go of this definite position that we have. So it's like learning how to let go and practicing it, letting go easily. So it's not like the Buddha is laying out step by step every situation. How do you get around this behavior? What if we have a behavior that's like we really get irritated by someone? This can easily happen. Even someone you care about a lot can feel really irritated. Maybe in some way their behavior is threatening our comfort or something like that. And to how do we act by speech and our actions without irritation, even though we feel it. We have to learn not to believe our feelings, not to be pulled around by them, not to follow them. Ajahn Gunhal will say, don't follow your thoughts and feelings. So you follow what you've already evaluated to be correct and according to Dhamma. But if it's not like that, it's not correct, it's not according to Dhamma, if we're responding with aversion, however weak or strong, what kind of, on the scale where it lands, it's still the same problem. We have an opportunity right there to change. And if we keep doing this, the Buddha said, notice that all these unskillful qualities lead downwards or lead away from the Dhamma. The skillful qualities lead upwards. So in the same way, someone who's given to cruelty is led upwards by not being cruel. Every time they're not cruel, every time you avoid killing, that's what you're used to doing, it leads upwards. And then finally, you keep doing this, and first the Buddha talks about how impossible it is to pull someone else out of sinking in the mud or quicksand if you're also standing in the quicksand. And quicksand, I think, is a better image here than mud. Because with mud, you might have, you sink in a bit, but there's something solid underneath at some point. But quicksand, it's not like that. The more you move in it, the more you get sucked down into it. And this might not mean much to most of you, but the same way with shelled corn. Like I grew up, in the farming area, and the big bins as big as this room or bigger and very tall, filled with corn that's been shelled off the cob. If you're up at the top and you fall in, you get sucked down. You can die that way. Scary. I know. It's just like there's nothing that you can't land on solid anything because it's just corn. And you can imagine that if you're in it, you can't help someone else out of it. But if you're on the side and you're holding on and you're on a platform or something, you can pull someone out. And so it says, like, a lot of times we think, oh, I'll help someone else, but we're in bad shape ourselves. So if we practice, we can actually be useful. If you're tamed, trained, and you yourself realize the relief and extinguishment is possible to help others. But in the same way, a cruel individual says extinguishes this cruelty by not being cruel. So you actually can eradicate this pattern in ourselves by continually going against it. We can really change. And this is what we have to do if we want to wake up. So it's not the only way. Sometimes we change because of insight. Sometimes through the practice, something really becomes clear to us, and then we'll never want to, do it the old way again. That's unskillful. But this is also what we need to be doing in the meantime. It puts in the causes and conditions for such insight to arise, as well as, gradually refining or rubbing away the defilements. So he says, I've taught the expositions by way of self-effacement, arising of thought. So the good, wholesome thought arises in your mind, the way to go around the unwholesome thought, to get past it, going up from that place where we've been stuck, and extinguishment. See what the footnote says. Yeah, he lists the five different, he goes through all 44 things 5 times. It's all these stages to relief from this suffering. Out of compassion, I've done what a teacher should do. Here are the roots of trees, empty huts, go practice. Don't regret it later. Yeah. Effacement is the name of this discourse, which is deep as the ocean. So, any questions or comments? Or anything else about today's teachings or your experience?
Sorry.
Go ahead, then we'll get to them.
So there can be a lot of this defilements, and some of those could be strong for us, and some of other ones maybe neutral, others are like doing good. So do we focus on the ones that are hard for us and tackle them, or do we want to try to develop all of those even though they're neutral or
I think it's depends on how an individual operates. Like, if so I don't know if everyone can hear the question, but it's about, well, let's say you have a number of these things going on. Some of them are really quite strong and others are more minor. Do you try to work on all of them, or do you just try to take one? I think what's useful is take the thing that's the most trouble and start there. Like we can, or just take what's coming up at the time. You can work on whatever arises that falls into this category. It doesn't mean that you have to go in some kind of order or anything. I don't think it's necessarily, it's kind of like you've got a lot of jobs to do. Which one are you going to do first? You're going to do the easy one that helps you get going, or are you going to dive right in on the toughest one? But I think with these kinds of things, it can be really, you can start to hopefully see the damage that it causes and try to work with whatever comes up that's problematic. And I think by working on one thing, it's easier to work on the other things too. That's my experience.
I was thinking, as we practice, we cultivate the wholesome qualities and the wholesome characters. But like, we learn that human beings change all the time, right? So it's kind of scary to me. Like, oh, there's a chance that I could change for the worse. Like, like trying to cultivate the good qualities that's on that list. But what if something that's down the pipeline that triggered me and I turn into like a really bad person or something? And that's like a really scary thought.
Yeah, don't think like that. The question is, what it's in human beings change all the time. What if something comes up later that causes me to become a bad person? It's like, no, you absolutely determine whatever arises. The more you follow the Dhamma, the more skills you have to address it. And the more you follow the Dhamma, the more easily you'll see if something arises that's unwholesome. And the purification of the mind and doing good things, really like that image that we so often talk about where, the goodness is the water and the badness is the salt, and it's, the the more water there is, the less potent the bad things are. So I think it's important to make use of the willpower we have in regard to these kinds of things. And then we're setting the mind on a good track. And then it's less and less possible for some old karma to actually throw you off. Yeah. Thank you for the question. It's good. Okay. Anyone else? Everybody looks pretty settled. Good. So I want to thank everyone for coming today, and thank you, Dustin, for the topic. And I hope that you find it valuable. And one thing that kind of came up in one of the earlier sessions today about having a different kind of experience with something that we usually react maybe strongly to, and then not having such a strong reaction, regardless of whether that's because we've been on retreat or whatever is happening, knowing that that's possible and experiencing that, keep bringing ourselves back to that experience and realizing that this is another option for our own way of responding and behaving. And that is so valuable to have that in our repertoire of experience. So I think we'll chant a blessing, and may you all be well. May you have every good blessing. May all the devas protect you by the power of all the Buddhas. May you ever be well. May you have every good blessing. May all the devas protect you by the power of all the Dhamma. May you ever be well. May you have every good blessing. May all the devas protect you by the power of all the Sanghas. May you ever be